boy, is there any news to talk about today? My goodness. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We've got the Chauvin verdict. I want to spend some time talking about this one, and I want to be methodological, not mythological. Go through some methodology on here. I want to be methodical. That's the word I'm looking for. The coffee has not kicked in. It's Wednesday. I want to be methodical in how I talk about this, and I welcome your phone calls. 877-973-7425. But let me just walk you through this. The jury in Minneapolis found Derek Chauvin guilty on all counts in the murder of George Floyd. Second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. I'm not sure that was right. Looking at look, I'm not a Minnesota lawyer. I did read the statutes. I haven't read the case law behind the second and third degree murder statutes. I think manslaughter, definitely. I don't know that the jury was bullied. I don't know, but it's going to be an issue for appeal. He will get a right to appeal. I'm kind of appalled by the people who think he wasn't entitled to some sort of due process. As I said yesterday, we cannot be governed by the mob. I also think we need to point out that for all the people who say we've got systemic racism in this country and injustice and people can't get a fair hearing, it sounds like there was justice for George Floyd by a system people say is systemically racist. So how did that happen? Maybe it's not systemic racism. There is clearly a great divide. The number of friends of mine I know who are upset about, honest to goodness, I didn't know. Let me be clear here in where I am. I did not know that I had as many friends as I do who didn't think anything should happen other than Chauvin should be thrown off the police force. But I do. I've heard from a lot of them. They are very disappointed. They feel like the mob bullied the jury. I want to tell you where I stand. And you know, I know a lot of people will let this play out, won't take a definitive line, let you feel like I agree with you, whatever your position is. That's not my style. I'll just tell you what I think. But let me tell you the facts first. If George Floyd had not committed a crime, George Floyd would still be alive. If George Floyd had listened to the police, George Floyd would still be alive. If George Floyd had not struggled with the police, with drugs in his system, he would still be alive. Those are just facts. Facts aren't mean. Facts aren't meant to be nasty. They're just facts. Here are also facts. Derek Chauvin kneeled on George Floyd's neck for more than 8 minutes. He wasn't convicted of a quick decision. He wasn't convicted of a split-second decision. George Floyd would have been alive had Chauvin not put his knee on his neck for 8 minutes. George Floyd would have been alive 4 minutes in to Chauvin's knee on his neck. Would have been alive 4 minutes in. This was on video. There were witnesses. He was still alive 4 minutes in and not struggling. George Floyd was alive and not struggling 5 minutes in when a medical personnel came upon the scene and offered to examine him to make sure he was okay, and Chauvin refused. George Floyd was alive or seemingly in a conscious state at 6 minutes when witnesses started clamoring for Chauvin to get his knee off his neck because he was no longer struggling, seemed to be in distress and was saying he couldn't breathe. George Floyd really wasn't alive as 9 minutes approached and paramedics arrived, and Derek Chauvin still would not get his knee off George Floyd's neck. The paramedics had to insist. This is not me making it up. This is part of the trial record. You can say George Floyd had drugs in his system. Maybe he died of an overdose. The jury disagreed. You can listen to the defense cross-examination and the defense, and you can say, well, he had drugs in his system. You can argue about oxygenation in his system. You will note that there was actually pretty damning information about the blood oxygenation level in his system from the prosecution, but the prosecution had screwed up and didn't give the information to the defense. We know it was not the rosy scenario the defense painted because of what we saw and the jury did not see, and yet the jury still chose to find him guilty. George Floyd would still be alive if George Floyd had not committed a crime. George Floyd would still be alive if he had not struggled with the police. George Floyd would still be alive if he had not tried to resist arrest. George Floyd might be alive had he not had drugs in his system. George Floyd was alive 4 minutes and 30 seconds and 5 minutes into Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck, and he was no longer struggling. And people with medical backgrounds were offering to help. He was clearly in distress, and Chauvin said no. Witnesses begged him to stop, and he said no. The police with him urged him to stop, and he said no. And the paramedics demanded he stop, and he said no. And he was found guilty. Those are just the facts. It is not condemning police to say Derek Chauvin was at least guilty of manslaughter. It is not an attack on all police to say there was one police officer who shouldn't have done what he did. And screw you if you think you need to be involved in some sort of tribalism where you're forced to take one side or the other because of your politics or ideology. Yeah, I just said that. And I stand by it. Facts still matter. Facts matter way more than what side of the aisle you're on. Facts matter way more than whether you're for Black Lives Matter or for all Blue Lives Matter. Facts matter way more than what you think. And I'm kind of appalled by people on both sides who've decided I've either got to take one side or the other. I can't look at the facts myself and make up my own damn mind anymore. I got to figure out, what's the memo from my side? Let me see what my side says. Oh, my side says because the other side says this is bad, I've got to say it's good. Oh, they just decided it was good too. It must be bad. George Floyd would still be alive had he not committed a crime. George Floyd would still be alive had Derek Chauvin taken his knee off his neck 4 minutes in. If frogs had wings, they wouldn't bump their butts as they hop around the ground. But you know what? They don't. We have to deal with facts as they are. And the facts as they are is that the jury did not deadlock and the system worked and Derek Chauvin was found guilty. Was the jury bullied? Maybe. There's an appeals process. Let it come out on the appeals process. Dan McLaughlin has this piece at National Review. Every jury trial operates on two levels. There is the serious question of what the verdict should be on the granular details of the evidence, not just who wins, but how much they get of what they are asking, and the broader risk of the jury doing something bizarre or unpredictable. In the Derek Chauvin trial, the serious question was whether Chauvin was properly guilty of manslaughter or of second-degree murder. Not having followed the evidence at trial in minute detail, I was never going to second guess the jury on that question. The good news is the jury did not deadlock and did not go off and do something wild. Here's the important point. Juries are often hesitant, and rightly so, to second guess cops when they make split-second life and death decisions. Those decisions may prove wrong, and on occasion they are justly punished as unreasonable, but cops tend to get the benefit of the doubt because most people understand that they need to assess threats to themselves and others in an instant, and it is all too easy to sit in judgment of that at leisure while plenty of time to review the situation without adrenaline pumping and fear vivid. That can even work in the favor of cops in a case such as the Rodney King beating, an obvious overreaction, but one that followed a lengthy high-speed chase that put the cops in genuine fear of death for themselves and others. None of that was on the table for Derek Chauvin's defense. George Floyd died slowly, and Chauvin kneeled on him for 8 minutes. No jury on earth was especially likely to see this as a reflex reaction in the heat of the moment. The cops had the right and responsibility to use some force to restrain and subdue Floyd, and maybe his death was due in part to other factors besides force. But the extended time involved in this case always made it likely that any reasonable jury would convict Chauvin of some crime bearing responsibility for the death of a man who did not deserve to die. And you may not like him. I have seen the character assassinations of George Floyd ongoing to this day. He was not a good person. He was no saint. But did you or he or anyone else, well after you've become responsive and are restrained, need someone's knee on your neck for 8 minutes and 50 seconds or whatever it was? I would submit to you the answer is no. And I would submit to you, if that makes you angry for me to say, you are probably devolved into your tribalist corner. And I would suspect if you are on the left and you can't acknowledge that, yes, the system works, and no, the system isn't systemically racist, and here's more proof of that, you too are in your tribalist corner. And I work very hard to stay out of my tribalist corner and to see both sides of the story. And the way I see this story is George Floyd would be alive had Derek Chauvin taken his knee off his neck after 5 minutes when people started asking him to and medical personnel grew concerned, and he chose not to. And there's a consequence for that. And I'm not going to second guess the jury. As I have said multiple times in the past 2 weeks, trust the American people, not the mob. The jury is the American people. The mob is not the American people. The American people tend to get it right. The jury, you may not like it, but based on the facts that they were there every day watching, not you armchair quarterbacks out there, they got it right. Juries don't always get it right. But given the facts of the situation, I would give the jury the benefit of the doubt here that they got it right. And I think the rest of this, the over-politicization of it, on both sides, by the way, is ridiculous. But I think more so, I think we've got to acknowledge, and the left will never acknowledge it, that their trial by mob mentality at this point, threatening to burn down America, is going to sacrifice the objectivity of our judicial system, and they themselves are putting our system under strain and calling into question the fairness of these situations. There would be many more people on the right who would be willing to trust the outcome and the jury had they not seen mobs across America threatening to burn America down if the mob didn't get their way. That leaves doubt in a lot of people's minds where it shouldn't. And to the extent there will be no healing and no unity and no reconciliation over this issue, that left-wing mob has a whole lot to do with it, because they don't want racial reconciliation, and they don't want unity, and they don't want healing, and they don't want a fair hearing. They want vengeance of some kind for some perceived slights, some real in the past, long gone, that they cling to and profit off of. And we shouldn't give them their due either. We should credit the jury for giving them their due and giving justice its due. But the mob, this mob mentality, it's got to stop. And there's not a single person on the left willing to call it out. And that's going to embolden it further. Frankly, Donald Trump runs again in 2024. It's probably why he would get reelected. And he would deserve to.
You can follow Erick around social media at EW.
Hi there, it is Erick Erickson. I'm delighted to have you with me today. 24 after the hour, the phone number 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. If you want to be a part of this here program, y'all, Mother's Day is upon us. Well, it's getting close, put it to you that way, and you need to figure out what are you going to do for Mother's Day. I've got a suggestion for you. It's actually a great suggestion because you know you struggled. Am I going to get her flowers and she can watch them spend a week dying and then have to pick up the mess? Am I going to send her something that she puts on the shelf and it gets gathered with dust? Am I going to send her pictures of the kids that she puts on the refrigerator on top of the old pictures of the kids? What am I going to do? Why don't you make your mother a delicious meal for Mother's Day? In fact, if you're a grill master, if you're a novice at the grill, if you know how to throw meat on the grill, Omaha Steaks is a great deal for you. Go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar. What you will see is the Let's Go Grill package. You will get steak, you will get boneless, skinless chicken breast, you will get pork chops, you'll get dessert, you'll get side, and you will get 12 burgers for free. 12 burgers, that's almost 4 pounds of burgers for free. You can have your mom and family over for a cookout. You can make steak for your mom, pork chops, chicken, whatever she wants. You got it. Throw it on the grill. Heat up the caramel apple tartlets, which my wife adores. And you've made your mom an impressive Mother's Day dinner. And you've done so at a great value. In fact, you get $20 off your first order. You save a lot on this package. If you were to go to the grocery store and get comparable, you would spend way more money, and the quality wouldn't be nearly as good. Omaha Steaks is great. It makes planning for events like this great and easy and affordable, and it'll make your mom happy. It'll be something to remember. Build memories with your mom. You hadn't seen any of these people in a year. You've been locked in your house. You hadn't been able to hang out with your whole family. So go build some memories, not just more knickknacks for the mantelpiece. Go to omahasteaks.com, put Georgia in the search bar. Make a feast for your mom. I have y'all heard this Nancy Pelosi clip? This is just utterly staggering to me. I cannot believe she did this. Well, actually, I guess this is part of her age. This is Nancy Pelosi on George Floyd.
Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that? Call out for your mom. I can't breathe. But because of you and because of thousands, millions of people around the world who came out for justice, your name will always be synonymous with justice. And now we have to make sure justice prevails in the sentencing. But that's its own procedure.
Thank you, George Floyd, for dying. What the heck is this? Thank you, George Floyd, for dying? He's not Jesus, Nancy. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was George Floyd. No, that's not what John 1 says. I'm sorry. No. He's not Jesus.
Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice.
What? There was no cross. What is this? This is when you've got secular. But she's a practicing Catholic, just like Joe Biden. When you get secular leftists who substitute religion, swap religion in politics, you get this. Thank you, George Floyd, for dying. Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing yourself. Oh, yes. I bet he's like, yeah, you're welcome, lady. You're welcome. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. And, of course, then you've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is still not, she's never happy.
So, no. This verdict is not justice. Frankly, I don't even think we call it full accountability because there are multiple officers that were there. It wasn't just Derek Chauvin. And I also don't want this moment to be framed as this system working.
That gives away the game right there. She doesn't want it framed. Forget the facts. She doesn't want it framed as the system working. Those other police officers will be tried separately. She doesn't want it framed. Okay. Facts matter more than framing, AOC. And she doesn't understand that. She doesn't want to understand that. Good gracious, these people. All right. I got a question when we come back. I got a question. I actually got a couple of questions when we come back. And have you heard last night while all this was going on, there was another shooting? Wait until you hear what National Public Radio did as it reported a different shooting. there. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Did y'all notice Jeffrey Toobin was nowhere to be seen on CNN? What is it with CNN? They spent more time last night grilling their commentators on their feelings about the verdict than the actual facts. I don't care about these people's feelings. And where was Jeffrey Toobin? I guess he's still, they haven't fired him at CNN. But he's still in hiding from having gotten, pleasured himself on a Zoom call in front of his colleagues. My goodness gracious. Nowhere to be seen. I got a couple of questions. I have some questions that I want to meditate on. In front of you, in public, I want to meditate on these questions. First, I'm thinking the Ahmaud Arbery situation and the George Floyd situation are situations that would have passed by out of sight, out of mind, and forgotten had there not been someone with an iPhone, video camera, camera recording and taking pictures. How many died unjustly out of sight because no one was recording? How many? The Ahmaud Arbery situation would not have come to light except for a YouTube video that showed him being gunned down in Brunswick, Georgia. The George Floyd situation was the same. I noticed there's a tendency now among some people on the right to immediately rush and defend any person who guns down someone who may have a problemed history. I don't think we should judge the actions of some based on the past behavior of others, but on what happens then and there. I think there's legitimacy to the people who say maybe Chauvin should be off the force, but not in jail. I think there's some legitimacy there. I do think at the here and now, so to speak, the then and there with George Floyd, there were complicating factors, including the drugs he was on and what he was doing and how he behaved. But I'm not going to question the jury there with a knee on his neck for over 8 minutes and he dies when people were asking the officer to let them examine George Floyd, who had clearly grown unresponsive. But I don't think tribalism is necessary. I don't think we should look at the Ahmaud Arbery situation and say, oh, well, the gossip is he used to do this stuff and he was a criminal. So, yeah, I think we need to defend the guys who killed him. No, you don't. Vigilante justice has no place in this country. How many people have died unseen, unrecorded, out of sight, unjustly? I sure bet it's many, but concurrent to that, how many have died out of sight, gunned down in places like Chicago through gun violence that the media doesn't want to look at in the collapse of left-wing hellholes in this country? The media doesn't want to look at that violence. It doesn't want to talk about the kids getting gunned down. It doesn't want to talk about the boys killing each other. It doesn't want to talk about the gang violence and why it's happening and the collapse of the two-parent heterosexual nuclear household. It doesn't want to talk about any of that. We're not allowed to talk about that. That's a problem the black community's got to talk about, apparently. And that's just a way for everybody else to say, well, we're not really going to talk about those deaths. We're going to talk about the ones at the hands of police that we can videotape so that we can be outraged about them or take them out of context, like the Rashard Brooks situation in Atlanta. In that situation, he was passed out in a Wendy's drive-thru. The police spent an hour with him, got him over to the curb, got him settled. They had to take him in. When they took him in, he decided to fight and struggle, shoved the cops, fought them, gave one a concussion, grabbed the taser of the other, fled, turned around and tried to fire at the police officer. The police officer did his training. He shot and shot to kill, not shot to wound, not shot to tickle, shot to kill. That's his training. He did it. Why is the police officer in that case the bad guy? Why is he the bad guy? That situation was different from the George Floyd situation. George Floyd did not struggle and then try to flee and fire a taser at a police officer where then he could have incapacitated the police officer and taken his gun from him. Nope. The Rayshard Brooks situation or the George Floyd situation are completely separate. Why aren't we allowed by the left to distinguish those? Another question. Who the hell wants to be a police officer in this country anymore? Why would you want to be a police officer in the United States of America in an urban setting where left-wing politicians and activist groups are going to come for you no matter what? You are presumed guilty until proven innocent in this country if you are a police officer at this point by the left. You are the symbol of systemic racism in their minds. Why would you want to put your life on the line for anyone? 99% of police officers in this country are heroes who get up every day and risk their life to keep you safe so that you can sleep well in your bed at night. They do it in the black community, the Hispanic community, the Asian community, the white community, the gay community, the straight community, the transgender community, you name it, doesn't matter. They're there for everybody. And black voters sure do like having police patrol their neighborhood at night, keeping them safe from gangs and others. Hispanic neighborhoods do. Hispanic women in Florida voted for Donald Trump because he didn't want to defund the police. We now know that data for certain. But why on earth would you want to be a police officer in this country now? You are immediately devalued by a large portion of the society, and politicians use you to be blamed so that they can whip into a frenzy and be with the left-wing mob. If you see a police officer today, perhaps you should thank him or her for doing their job for you to keep you safe. Because my goodness, they are at this point probably the most stigmatized profession in the nation because a small handful of police officers behaving badly are being joined, and this is important, being joined with a larger handful of police officers who are doing their jobs, but video of them is being mischaracterized by armchair quarterbacks who just want to make people mad. As much as I think law enforcement body cameras are a good thing, and cameras are a good thing, I think you also have to notice, note, and pay attention to the fact the number of snap judgments and rush to judgments that we get from people who armchair quarterback those videos, many of whom have no training, do not understand split-second decisions, or who don't care about the split-second decisions, and immediately, in every case, blame the police officer for getting it wrong. And in so many cases, the victim is a victim who did something that got them to that status badly when the police respond. You know, there are situations like the George Floyd situation. In my mind, you can disagree with me, where had the officer taken his knee off George Floyd's neck 5 minutes in, George Floyd probably still would be alive. The officer would not be going to jail for murder. There are other situations where the police officer pulls the gun and shoots the kid. And you know what? The kid had to die. And I'm sorry, but he did, because otherwise the cop would have died. And all that gets left out of the tape. There's plenty of revisionism out there. The Michael Brown situation that led to the rise of Black Lives Matter. We know he was charging the police officer. The police officer had to shoot him. We know that. We know the position of his body, how he was angled as he was charging the police officer from the forensics. We know that. The hands up, don't shoot was a lie. It was a prepackaged lie by the left to make the police officers look bad when it wasn't the police officer's fault. But you're not allowed to distinguish. You got to take Michael, you got to take that guy, Michael Brown, you got to take Rayshard Brooks, you got to take Ahmaud Arbery, you got to take George Floyd, you got to lump them all together and say, police all bad, as opposed to let's look at the facts of each individual situation. Why on earth would you want to be a police officer in the 21st century in the United States in urban areas? And I'll tell you what, it's going to cause a crime wave. And you will be reminded that you need police. Because you do. National Public Radio is now running this story about the shooting in Ohio, Ma'Khia Bryant. Let me read you the story, the headline. Columbus police shoot and kill black teenage girl. A 16-year-old black girl was fatally shot by an officer outside her home after she called the police to help on Tuesday afternoon, according to her family. The girl has been identified as Makia Bryant by her aunt Hazel Bryant. Bryant allegedly called officers at about 4:30 p.m. local time when a group of older kids threatened her with assault. Her aunt told Ohio State House News Bureau reporter Andy Chow she did not elaborate on the nature of the threat. The Columbus Police Department could not say on Tuesday whether Bryant was the one to call for assistance before she was shot. Bryant was taken to a local hospital in critical condition where she later died. At a Tuesday night press conference, the Columbus Police Department released an edited version of the body camera video worn by the officer who shot Bryant. Police have not made public the name of that officer. Interim Chief of Police Michael Woods told reporters the officer will be pulled off patrol duty as the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation looks into the shooting. Columbus Police showed the video a second time in slow motion during Tuesday night's news conference. Wood said the video showed Bryant holding a knife as she pushed two girls. He said police believe she was attempting to stab both girls during the fight. It's unclear, based on the footage, at what point Bryant got a hold of the knife. The fatal shooting occurred shortly before the verdict in the trial of Erick Chauvin. Now, you got to scroll down to the bottom. And hey, there's this at the very bottom of the story. This is a developing story. Some facts reported by the media may later turn out to be wrong. We will focus on reports from police officials and other authorities, credible news outlets, and reporters who are on the scene, and we will update this as the situation develops. Yep, you heard that right. That they go through this story goes, I mean, you got to scroll. Oh, there's the social media outrage. There's the mayor's tweet. There's more outrage. There's more tweets. There's the say her name, Makia Bryant. And then this is a developing story. Some facts reported by the media may turn out to be wrong. Why would you want to be a police officer in the 21st century in the United States of America? Why would you want to do that? I'm not sure. But God bless those who do, because we need them. So I want to play this clip by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez one more time. If you haven't heard this clip, this is AOC talking about the verdict last night.
So no, this verdict is not justice. Frankly, I don't even think we call it full accountability, because there are multiple officers that were there. It wasn't just Erick Chauvin. And I also don't want this moment to be framed as this system working, because it's not working. And that's what creates a lot of complexity in this moment.
She doesn't want it framed as the system working. Why doesn't she want it framed as the system working? You all know why, of course. She can't fundraise off of it. If the system is actually working, she can't cite the grievance, and she is desperately in need of people thinking there's a terrible grievance in this country when there really isn't a terrible grievance in this country. There are problems. Every country has problems. We have problems. But the idea that our country is somehow worse than China or our justice system is terrible, not really. I mean, look at the system. The system worked. But they can't bring themselves to admit the system worked because they need the grievance. Part of the problem we have in this country is people need grievances to keep themselves on television and in the media and fundraising. Can you imagine if everyone said, you know what, the system worked? The system worked. Well, then who would be able to pay for the mortgage for the Black Lives Matters protest operators? Who would be able to give Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez donations and pay attention to her social media? The system, to get the exposure, you've got to convince everyone that there's a terrible problem in this country. And if oh, God help the facts, it's the framing that matters. If the framing is off, well, that undermines their ability to fundraise.
Honest news and conservative views.
Hello, it's Erick Erickson. Oh, I'm behind on everything I wanted to talk about at this time, but I'm going to go into dangerous territory here. While I'm alienating everyone and making everyone mad, I might as well continue burning bridges with everyone this morning. You know, you can call 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. There is something else that has to be said. Yeah, I'm going to say this. Unfortunately, it is being said by the people who are saying it to be biblical donkeys. The word a and then the whole put together, that there are people saying these things, and they are doing it as abrasively and as much to inflame tensions as anything else. But it should be said. If the police approach you and they tell you to stop. If the police approach you and you have a fake gun in your hand, drop it. If the police approach you and you have a knife in your hand, drop it. If the police approach you and ask you to get out of your car, get out of your car. If the police approach you, pull you over at night, turn on the light on the inside, put your hands on the steering wheel where they can see them. Treat the police with respect. They have a high-stress job. They're under fire, literally and metaphorically, by people, bad guys and politicians. They're being vilified. They're stressed out. When the police approach you, more than likely you're going to come out of it alive, and you increase the odds of not being harmed in some way by actually just listening to what the police ask you to do. The vilification by the police, by the left in this country, they're overplaying it. But you know what? There's a reason Americans tend to side with police. Because the police tend to be right. The reason people are reacting to some degree with celebration and surprise with the George Floyd verdict is because it's rare for a jury to send a police officer off to jail for doing his freaking job. Because in split-second decisions, which this one was not, it was 8 minutes, 50 seconds or whatever. In split-second decisions, you give the police the benefit of the doubt. You don't give the bad guy the benefit of the doubt. The amount of lies that have been perpetuated against the police about racial profiling, disparate impact, and the like, it is all organized and sustained by a group of people who would like to disrupt and fundamentally undermine the stability of this country so they can begin again anew in some version anathema to our founders because they have decided that this whole country is racist and systematically racist, and the police are the forefront of instilling and imposing that racism on all of us, and the whole narrative is crap, and it is a narrative. It's not fact-based. It's storytelling by the left because they do not like the country. The reason they do not like the country is because there are impediments to them being able to impose their will on others through a system of checks and balances and federalism and judges and law enforcement and the like, and they don't like it, so they have to undermine every bit of this country's stability, every bit of this country's organization, and every bit of this country's government in order to hopefully bring about some fundamental change, because the communist revolution they hoped for in the 80s never came, and now they're agitating again moving forward. But the bottom line is the police here are not the bad guys. Are there individual police officers who are bad? Yes. Are the police bad? No. Are the police racist? No. Are they propping up systemic racism? No. If you are encountering with the police, what should you do? Do what the police officer tells you to do. It's not rocket science. Daunte Wright would be alive had he not struggled and tried to flee. George Floyd would be alive had he not struggled and tried to resist arrest. The difference between the two is one involved a split-second decision from a police officer who screwed up and thought she had a taser, and the other involved a police officer who kept his knee on George Floyd's neck long after he stopped resisting. You should be able to distinguish between them. To the extent you can't, that's your problem, not mine, but stop blaming police for everything that goes wrong in this country. Stop worrying about the frame, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that somehow the system is still unjust and racist. No, it's not. It is not. People's brains may be rotted into believing that stuff, but there's no reason for your brain to rot. Rotting your brain is a choice. The left has made it. There's no reason for those of us on the right to make the same choice. And too many are, by the way. Too many are. Oh, they think it's good. I must think it's bad. They think it's bad. I must think it's good. They're on this side. I must be on this side. Who cares what the facts say? Let's all frame it together.
30.
I think I'll let the facts decide. And you should too. And now we're going to move on to other things because I've exhausted this topic and there's way more to life than worrying about a situation that is out of our control that we can't now change. So we will move on when we come back. I will take your phone calls, 877-973-7425. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. How are you today? It is April 22nd, Wednesday. It is 6 after the hour. And, well, I don't want to talk about Chauvin anymore or George Floyd. I want to move on to a subject none of us are interested in, except we should be. I actually am fascinated by this. What a way to sell it out of the gate, huh? None of us are interested in this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I am, because it's actually relevant. For the purposes of the following conversation, I will be referring to soccer, not football, so people understand what I'm actually talking about. In Europe, I mentioned this on the show yesterday. You're going to have to bear with me here. There's a method to my madness, and this isn't actually about the football situation. This actually is a fascinating dynamic that is happening out there. In Europe, the billionaire owners of several of the major European teams decided to do a new closed soccer league. The closed soccer league would compete for attention, the Super League, and it took some of the best teams in Europe, including multiple teams from Great Britain, and put them together. And there was national and international backlash over it. Essentially what would happen, what does happen right now is you've got the leagues. Each country has a league. The best of each country play together in a championship league, and the winner is arguably the best soccer team in the country, in the world. Well, let me just read you out of the gate some of the New York Times coverage here. Plans for a European Soccer Super League collapsed spectacularly on Tuesday as the Project 6 Premier League teams, half the Super League's founding members, walked away from the plan only 2 days after it was announced. Manchester City, one of the 6 English teams that had signed up as founding members of the new Super League, was the first to confirm it was out, saying in a one-sentence statement that it had begun the process of withdrawing from the project. Within hours, Chelsea, Manchester United, Arsenal, Tottenham Hotspur, and Liverpool all signaled they too would decline to take part. Soon after that, it was all over. Inter Milan was out as well, and just after midnight in Europe, a top Super League official confirmed the entire project had been suspended. The league released an unsigned statement blaming outside pressure for its demise. The denouement was a stunning implosion for a multi-billion-dollar proposal that had prompted howls of outrage from nearly every quarter of the sport since it was announced on Sunday, and the culmination of a frantic 48 hours of arguments, threats, and intrigue at the highest levels of world soccer. Manchester City's about-face came soon after it celebrated Spanish coach Pep Guardiola slammed the plans for a closed competition, saying, "It is not a sport if it doesn't matter if you lose." Chelsea spent the day preparing a similar reversal. It did so while its own fans held a protest march on the streets outside the club stadium, and while its team, reportedly in mutiny over the plan, played a Premier League match against Brighton. Tottenham Hotspurs expressed regret for taking part. Manchester United acknowledged that its fans had helped to change the club's mind. "We have listened carefully to the reaction of our fans, the UK government, and other key stakeholders," the team said. Arsenal's announcement came with an apology. They said, "We made a mistake. We apologize." Earlier, Manchester United had announced that its executive vice chairman, Ed Woodward, one of the main drivers behind the Sports League plan, would leave the club at the end of the year. Neither he nor the club's co-chairman, Joe Glazer, made any reference to the Super League in a statement hailing his tenure. The loss of the giant Premier League clubs was the death blow for the Super League, stripping it of the competitive legitimacy and the relevance it had hoped would make it attractive to sponsors and broadcasters, and leaving the remaining clubs, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Atletico Madrid from Spain, and Italy's Juventus and AC Milan, with little choice but to abandon the proposal. FIFA pushed back, the world soccer governing bodies, the UK soccer governing body, all of them pushed back. The future King of England, Prince William, is the head of British Soccer League, and he was livid. The man who can take no opinion on anything by virtue of him one day becoming king came out stridently opposed to it and had the fans. Now, I'm not really talking about this for soccer, and I'm not really talking about this for the Super League. I'm talking about this because there's something else at stake here that people are ignoring, and I want to play you a clip real quick. This is John W. Henry. Liverpool is one of the big football clubs, one of the big soccer clubs in the United Kingdom. And John W. Henry owns the club. You will notice when you hear this, he's an American. Pay close attention here, because you're not going to get it more likely than not unless you're really into European football. But there's a real lesson here that you've got to learn, and it has a lot to do with Taylor Swift. Listen to this.
I want to apologize to all the fan supporters of Liverpool Football Club for the disruption I caused over the past 48 hours. It goes without saying, but should be said, that the project put forward was never going to stand without the support of the fans. No one ever thought differently in England. Over these 48 hours, you were very clear that it would not stand. We heard you. I heard you. And I want to apologize to Jurgen, to Billy, to the players, and to everyone who worked so hard at LFC to make our fans proud. They have absolutely no responsibility for this disruption. They were the most disrupted, and unfairly so. This is what hurts most. They love your club and work to make you proud every single day. I know the entire LFC team has the expertise, leadership, and passion necessary to rebuild trust and help us move forward. More than a decade ago, when we signed up for the challenges associated with football, we dreamed of what you dreamed of, and we've worked hard to improve your club. Our work isn't done, and I hope you'll understand that even when we make mistakes, we're trying to work in your club's best interests. In this endeavor, I've let you down. Again, I'm sorry, and I alone am responsible for the unnecessary negativity brought forward over the past couple of days. It's something I won't forget, and shows the power the fans have today and will rightly continue to have. If there's one thing this horrible pandemic has clearly shown, it's how crucial fans are to our sport and to every sport. It's shown in every empty stadium. It's been an incredibly tough year for all of us, virtually no one unaffected. It's important that the Liverpool football family remain intact, vital, and committed to what we've seen from you globally with local gestures of kindness and support.
We can leave it there. That's John W. Henry. He's an American entrepreneur, billionaire, owner of Liverpool, the football club, the soccer club in Great Britain. Multiple times in that video, John W. Henry referred to Liverpool as LFC. No one refers to Liverpool as LFC. Now, if you're not a fan, you don't know that. But if you are a fan, you do. It is not referred to LFC in the British press, the European press, among the fans of any club. No one refers to it as LFC. The billionaire American who lives across the pond from his club refers to it as LFC. There's a striking disconnect there. I bring this up because here's what's actually going on. And this is why the reason the breakup of the supposed Super League in Europe is relevant to you has everything to do with Taylor Swift. There was a very interesting piece on a website I read called Stratechery by a guy named Ben Thompson talking about the power of fandom. And you heard John Henry in this clip referring to the power of the fans to stop the Super League. Let me explain to you what happened. When Taylor Swift got started, she agreed to a number of albums 6 albums to a record label called Big Machine Records that was largely established for her. In 2008, she released Fearless, the second biggest one. After she could step away, she did move to Republic Records and the Universal Music Group, and then Scott Borchetta, the founder of Big Music Records, sold the label to a guy named Scooter Braun, who's friends with Kanye West, and Taylor Swift does not like him. Taylor Swift did not like the sale, and they refused to give her her masters for her records back. What Taylor Swift did then was a bit of genius. She recognized the power of fans, the way the record labels didn't. BlackRock, the investment company, bought into Big Machine, the record label that owned Taylor Swift's masters. They valued it at about $300 million and said Taylor Swift's records alone were about $200 million. And what Taylor Swift has now done is she's gone out and she's recorded new versions of the Fearless album. And now it's called Fearless, Taylor's version. On top of that, the new company, Shamrock Capital, that owns Swift's masters, can't give sync licensing because of Taylor Swift. Now, what is sync licensing? This is a very technical term, but when you want to use Taylor Swift's music in a TV show or an advertising campaign or a music video or a movie, you've got to get a sync license. That is, you have to get a license to be able to sync the music to the actions on the screen. And that license comes not from the record label, but from the artist. Taylor Swift is refusing to give sync licenses for her old albums. There are music streaming licenses that have already been given out that she can't stop, but she can now stop offering up new licenses. She has to consent, and she's refusing now. If you want to play Taylor Swift's music in movies or TV shows or on YouTube, or you want to start a new streaming service and have Taylor Swift's catalog there, you have to use her new stuff because she's no longer giving licenses. And the reason she can do it is because she knows the fans will side with her. It doesn't matter what the facts actually are. As Ben Thompson noted, that Eric Logan, who is a board member of Big Machine, said to Taylor Swift, wrote this publicly, somewhere you have told the story to yourself that you have the right to change history, facts, and reframe any story you want to fix with any narrative you wish. But as someone who has been by Scott's side, the new owner, from before you were born, I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and allow you to rewrite history and bend the truth to justify your lack of understanding of a business deal. The facts will come out, you'll be proven wrong, and people will begin to see that the world you perpetrate only through your lens is not reality. And yet it is. She has created her reality. This is very much like Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle did a segment in one of his Netflix bits. Dave Chappelle went with Comedy Central, signed contracts. The contracts weren't great in his favor. HBO has continued to replay his comedy bits on HBO, and he went to the fans and said to the fans, stop watching this stuff. Stop watching this stuff. It doesn't benefit me. They screwed me in the deal, and you watching continues to perpetuate it. Stop. And the fans stopped watching. And HBO and Viacom had to pull all of Dave Chappelle's stuff. The moral of the story from all of these, and this is the fascinating dynamic here, is we have arrived at an age where the creator, the creator, the artist, can have a direct connection with the listener, with the fan, in ways that the big guns can't stop now. The billionaire football league owners who are completely out of touch with the fans and don't even call their football soccer teams by the names the fans do, want to make more money. They own and control the team, and they can't do what they want to do with their own property because the fans have held them hostage. The record label can make no more money off of Taylor Swift because Taylor Swift's fans are with Taylor Swift. They don't have a relationship with the record owner. Dave Chappelle can do what Dave Chappelle's doing because they don't have the fans don't have a relationship with CBS Viacom. They got a relationship with Dave Chappelle. They don't have a relationship with Warner Brothers. They got a relationship with Dave Chappelle. If he says, go watch me on Netflix, nowhere else, guess what? They're going to go watch on Netflix because he wants them to. The economy is being upended by fandom and by direct relationship in a way that the internet has allowed people to connect online in ways that never existed before. And that's why all of this is fascinating, whether you care about the soccer leagues or not. In the past, these owners would have been able to do it and get away with it, even with governmental pressure, because they could. But now the fans can say, you know what? We're not going to watch you anymore. We're not going to listen to you anymore. We're going to tune you out. Or, hey, this company wants to get rid of you. We'll follow you wherever you go. You got a radio show and they want to boot you off? Well, we will follow you online to your streaming service. We will follow you to your podcast. We'll follow you to your Substack page. We're invested in you, not the company. The great, mighty Fortune 500 companies themselves, we're seeing this with the wokes, but there's a lesson here for us too in this. They're following along with the wokes, not because the wokes are their consumer engine, but because the wokes are internal to them now in upper management. But consumers still matter, and the consumer base of conservatives is still big. And conservatives can learn from all of these things that fandom and consumer relationships still matter. And if conservatives maybe don't boycott companies, but say, hey, we're going to shop here instead, do a boycott instead of a boycott, their fandom matters too, and people will pay attention to conservatives when they shift their dollars around, just like the fans of all these people do.
He doesn't just have a radio show.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. One more bit on all of this. One of the things we are seeing, because of the level of fandom in society now, thanks to the internet, talk radio show hosts, TV personalities, writers, artists, musicians, chefs, they can have direct relationships with their fans, with their listeners, with their readers, with their viewers. And the billionaire owners of companies are more restricted today in what they can do than they could do in the past. So, for example, if you want to move, just take the soccer teams in Great Britain and in Europe, you want to move them into a super league and the fans say no, well, you may own the team, you may own it all, but you can't do it because the fans will crush you. Or, to some degree, this goes back to even the New Coke days in the 1980s. Coca-Cola decided it wanted to reinvent New Coke, wanted to bring out New Coke, tasted more like Pepsi, and then they couldn't, and they had to bring back Coke Classic, which, of course, then they swapped out for real sugar for the high fructose corn syrup. You can get Mexican Coke, and it still has the real sugar and the taste from the early 80s, and you can cook with it. You can't cook with Coke that has high fructose corn syrup, but you can with Mexican Coke because it uses cane sugar. But Coke had to cave to fan pressure. And more billionaire owners of companies outside of certain segments of corporate America now have to do fan service in ways they did not in the past because people can collaborate, conspire, and work together on the internet to bring down big companies or put pressure on them. There is a lesson to be learned here, I think, for conservatives if they do it well when it comes to pushing back on the wokes in the Fortune 500. Because conservatives have a buying power in this country that outpaces young wokes. Now, certainly there are rich people on the left who will step up, but many of them won't. You, for example, can go shop at Home Depot instead of Lowe's tomorrow to offset the boycott that the left is engaging in on Home Depot because of the voting rights bill. You can choose affirmatively to shop somewhere as opposed to shopping nowhere. You can choose to take your business somewhere, and they will listen to you. And I think that's something to be considered. And a lot of this was not possible before now. The organizations of boycotts and boycotts and the like, the internet has made a lot of this stuff possible. The ability to have a relationship with you, like if your local station decides to drop me, you can still go to ErickEricksonShow.com and hear my live stream and get my Substack. You get everything, whether they've got me or not. It is possible now to bypass the billionaires who are only just now getting a clue that they aren't quite as in control of a lot of stuff as they once thought, and there's really nothing they can do about it, which is actually kind of fascinating as the economy changes around them.
Okay.
Oh, we need to talk about my alma mater. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You've probably heard about this story. I mentioned it a little while ago, but figured I would wait and let things settle down. Shaniqua Walker Barnes is a Mercer University associate professor. I went to Mercer University. It is my alma mater. Went there undergrad and law school. Met my wife there. Our roommates were engaged. She is a professor, associate professor of practical theology on the Atlanta campus. Now, you to put this in perspective, my alma mater, I got a scholarship to go to Duke University and wound up not going. I grew up in a small school in Dubai, moved back to rural Louisiana to a small school, and when I went on road trips with my dad to look at colleges, my mom wanted me to check out the Baptist school in Georgia. Little did we know how little Baptist it was, Mercer. And then I went up to Duke, and they wanted me to know I needed them. They didn't need me, and I just left a bad taste. My campus was beautiful. There are times I have regretted it, but I would have not met my wife, and I got a great education at Mercer. It's a good school, and it keeps growing. But the school when I was there, to put this in context, they had a Christianity department that was massively intent on being a religion department. I have never experienced in my life up until that moment a department of Christianity that worked overtime to make sure that there were no Christians by the time you got out of the program. I mean, wow, they might as well have had a bunch of Hindus and Buddhists running the Christianity department as far as I was concerned. I'll never forget, actually, the first week I was at Mercer. I grew up in small town Louisiana. I went to the First Baptist Church, and I decided, hey, I'm going to go to the First Baptist Church in Macon, because I went to the First Baptist Church in the small town I was in Louisiana. Went down to the church, and the woman in the pulpit that Sunday, warning. Woman in the pulpit that Sunday decided to, the lesson was that we have become, how was it? We've become too scriptural and need to spend more time in the sacred. We look in the Bible too much, and we need to connect to our spirit. Yeah, I mean, what the heck was this? Pretty sure I was going to hell for just having sat there and listened to that crap. So I went home, and I called my preacher at home. I said, Brother Joe, what do I do? He said, there aren't any good Baptist churches in Maine. Now, this was early 90s. I don't know that he had heard of Ingleside Baptist, which is a massive Baptist church in Macon, very, very good church. But he says, go find a church with the letters PCA. I'd be one, but for the sprinkling. So went to a Presbyterian church. My parents were horrified, but I was like, hey, your Baptist preacher said go. Been in the PCA ever since, even though I grew up Southern Baptist. But the Mercer was that way. And it eventually severed ties with the Baptists, with the Georgia Baptists. It never really was that Baptist. It's a good school. And I listen, I realize academics and administrators tend to be further left than I am in a lot of stuff, but I got a good education. Think very highly of the administrators there. I would love one day to be able to teach a class in the political science department and combine broadcast and radio and communication and politics like my buddy James Carville does at Tulane. He for years, James Carville has suggested that I should try to do something like that. I would love to do it. It'd be a lot of fun. But I think I'd be chased off campus at Mercer. I spoke one time at Mercer for their Founders Day, and the Women and Gender Studies Department nearly had coronary. The angry women in comfortable shoes sat there and scowled. Some of them wanted to walk out. I thought it was hilarious myself. The intolerant gang of the victim studies classes. That's not funny. Well, they got this associate professor of practical theology, Shaniqua Walker Barnes. She's drawn criticism. There was a book released in February, A Rhythm of Prayer, a collection of meditations for renewal. Let me read you the way the book is described. It is Sarah Bessie, Amina Brown, and Barbara Brown Taylor, editors and contributors. It is a New York Times bestseller. For the weary, the angry, the anxious, and the hopeful, this collection of moving, tender prayers offers rest, joyful resistance, and a call to act. Oh, boy. Well, so It's essentially woke theology. And the controversial prayer from the professor at Mercer University is, "Dear God, please help me to hate white people." Dear God, please help me to hate white people. Okay. Okay. Now here's how here, let me just put this in accurate context for you from a sympathetic source. "Dear God, please help me to hate white people." So begins the prayer of Dr. Chaniqua Walker Barnes, a black Christian woman and a professor of theology who's been working towards racial reconciliation for decades. Her prayer, recorded in the bestseller book A Rhythm of Prayer, goes on listing all the reasons why it would make sense to hate white people. "I learned about this prayer for a weary black woman on Twitter when Rod Dreher, a commentator I've read sporadically, tweeted, 'Progressives prepare something terrible and violent for America. This left-wing prayer book embodies the spirit of the Antichrist, petitioning God to grant one of the spirit of anti-white racial hatred.' It's a bestseller from a major publisher." He linked to his essay, A Rhythm of Racist Prayer. His tweet included a picture of a black woman, Walker Barnes, speaking at Biola University with the words, "Reconciliation without justice is cheap," written on her t-shirt. Now, let me read you what Rod Dreher had to say. The book contains the prayer, and let me read you more of what she actually says. "Dear God, please help me to hate white people, or at least to want to hate them. At least I want to stop caring about them individually and collectively. I want to stop caring about their misguided racist souls, to stop believing they can be better, that they can stop being racist. I am not talking about the white anti-racist allies who have taken up this struggle against racism with their whole lives, the ones who stand vigil for weeks outside jails where black women are killed, who show up in Charlottesville and Ferguson and Baltimore and Pasadena to take a public stand against racism and police brutality, who are so committed to fighting white supremacy that their own lives bear the wounds of its scars. No, those aren't the people I want to hate. I'm not even talking about the ardent racists either, the strident segregationists who mow down nonviolent anti-racist protesters, who open fire on black churchgoers, hoping to start a race war. These people are already in hell. There's no need to waste hatred on them. Perhaps, however, you can make sure they don't take the rest of us with them with their attempt at harming others are thwarted and they don't gain access to positions of power. My prayer is that you would help me to hate the other white people. You know, the nice ones. The Fox News-loving, Trump-supporting voters who don't see color but who make thinly veiled racist comments about those people. The people who are happy to have me over for dinner but alert the neighborhood watch anytime an unrecognized person of color passes their house. The people who welcome black people in their churches and small groups but brand us as heretics if we suggest that Christianity is concerned with the poor and the oppressed. The people who politely tell us that we can leave when we call out the racial microaggressions we experience in their ministries. But since I don't have many relationships with people like that, perhaps they are not a good use of hatred either. Lord, grant me then the permission and the desire to hate the white people who claim the progressive label, but who are really wolves in sheep's clothing. Those who've learned enough history, read enough books, spent enough time in other countries to make themselves seem knowledgeable, even though that knowledge remains far removed from their hearts. Those whose unexamined white supremacy bubbles up every time I'm not expecting it. When I have my guard down and my heart open, Lord, if you can't make me hate them, at least spare me from their perennial gaslighting, white mansplaining, and white woman tears. Lord, if it be with your will, harden my heart. And on it goes. Now, here's the thing. This woman doesn't need to be canceled. By the way, she's leaving Mercer. She's taking a job at a seminary, I believe the report was. Yes, she is going to teach at a seminary in Decatur. In Decatur, what seminary is it? Oh, it's the left-wing heretical Presbyterian one in Decatur, I bet. It's the heretical Presbyterians over there, I think, or is it the? I think it's that one. In any event, a lot of people want this woman canceled. for this. I don't think she should be canceled. She has a right to academic freedom and speech, but I suspect it's a speech she doesn't want to give others. She uses the language of a critical theorist, and you remember critical theorists believe that the dominant discourses need to be silenced, and they don't really like the idea of academic freedom for people other than themselves. I don't know her. Who knows? But what I will tell you this is, do any of you have any doubt in your mind that if a white professor at Mercer University wrote a prayer, said, please, dear God, please help me to hate black people. The black people who come into my church and accuse me of microaggressions where none were meant, who can't get over chips on their shoulder, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Does anybody think that Mercer University would keep that person on their payroll, or any other university? And this is the problem here with this. The problem is not that she wrote this. She is an academic of the left, a theologian. I don't know her heart. She claims she loves the Lord. But she can get away with this. And if a white woman wrote it, or a white man wrote it, you and I both know darn well they would not still have a job. And if we are in a society that values equality, or now equity, I'm not sure that you are really supporting equal rights and academic freedom if she can say this and a white person can't. Now, I don't know that that's the case. But does anybody question it? I mean, the fact that I can sit here and say, I'm not sure, but I strongly suspect, and every single last one of you do too, that a white person couldn't get away with this, tends to suggest that there's a lot of pablum in the whole idea of equality when it comes to the left. There's a whole, they want equal treatment, but then they don't. If a white person said the same thing, they would be condemned. And rightly so, if we're honest. But a black person can say this. Well, history. Yeah, except these are academics, and you got academic freedom. And if a white academic said this, the white academic should have tenure and freedom and the ability to say this. The black person does, gets a pass at this. I'm not sure why if we believe in equality. Why can there be consequence on one and not the other? Why should one be given a pass and not the other if we're all about academic freedom, freedom of speech, tenure? Fact of the matter is, she spoke what was on her heart. I'm not going to condemn this woman for being honest in her prayers. And I'm not going to condemn the university for standing by her and saying she's allowed to say it. The statement from Mercer University says Mercer University has more than 1,900 faculty and staff, and they represent a wide array of perspectives relating to their fields of expertise, their political and religious viewpoints, as well as personal matters. None of them speak for the university or for anyone within the university, but each of them enjoys wide latitude in expressing their perspective, as do Mercer students. They have a right to express themselves, as do those who thoughtfully disagree. Amen, and amen, and amen. And I call bull, because I genuinely believe that if a white person had written something similar, that wouldn't be the reaction. And that is the problem, that you know it, and I know it, and they know it, and everyone claims equality. And if it's equal, well, then you should have the exact same reaction to defend, and they wouldn't. And you know they wouldn't, and I know they wouldn't, and they know they wouldn't. And the problem here, if we're really diving deep in this, is that it then emboldens people to make those claims and make those statements, saying, well, I'll make them because nobody else will make them. I'll be the one to say it. And no one finds the racial reconciliation they want. You know, we're in this weird situation now, particularly in churches. Like, you know, yesterday I talked about the churches up in Washington, the PCA church up there. They're all in on racial reparations now, not reconciliation, but But reparations, the Bible says it. Yes, the Bible says love your neighbor so much that you get the government to take his money and give it to someone else so you feel better about yourself. Yep, that sure is loving your neighbor. Clearly some organized hate out there. I called that out yesterday. You should see the level of invective coming at me for calling out the nonsensical idea that the Bible says there must be reparations. But the larger issue here is with these critical theorists who believe this sort of stuff, who use this sort of language about anti-white allyship and nonsense like that. They're not actually looking for reconciliation. When you start talking about microaggressions, you're talking about someone who's easily offended, oftentimes by things that aren't aggressions, so the people don't even know that they're offending you, and yet we got to give you some lip service to it. Maybe show the other people a little more grace. Maybe stop trying to embrace critical theories and maybe be honest with all of us and tell us that, yes, this person can get away with this because of the color of their skin, and no, that's not equality, but equality really isn't what we're after. And then we can talk.
You can follow Erick around social media.
Oh my goodness gracious! Holy cow! You gotta wait until you get a load of this. A Washington state doctor is behind bars, charged with a diabolical plan to hire a hitman off the dark web to maim a former employee and abduct and extort his estranged wife. A vengeful plot foiled by news reporters. Now, what is the dark web? You need to understand what the dark web is. There is an internet that exists underneath the internet you see. You cannot get to that level of the internet with your browser. It takes something called the Onion browser, and you can get there, and essentially it's a place where you can find stolen credit card numbers, you can buy drugs, you can hire hitmen, I guess. All sorts of criminals go there. It's not a safe place to go on the internet. It is essentially the seedy bar that you go to at night and buy illicit drugs from the bartender, except without having to go to the seedy bar at night and hire the bartender. You just connect to him over the dark web using your computer, and they mail you drugs to your house. A lot of those places have been busted by the FBI, but it's a legit global enterprise. And you can find all sorts of stuff on the dark web. It's where the child pornographers and people like that go. You don't want to go there. The allegations against Dr. Ronald Ilg, ILG, a Spokane neonatologist, contained in federal court papers include a polyamorous relationship, Bitcoin payments, chilling text messages, and a suicide attempt. I effed it up irreparably, he allegedly confessed in the note authorities discovered when they found him unconscious from an apparent Xanax overdose, which he survived. The wild tale begins with journalists from an unnamed news organization who have also derailed an alleged murder-for-hire plot in another state, investigating the seamiest, most anonymous quarters of the online world. According to a criminal complaint, the reporters found disturbing communications from Ilg and contacted one of his alleged targets, who then turned to authorities for help. Ilg is now behind bars, charged with attempted kidnapping. It appears that before his arrest, his life was in tatters, as first reported by the Spokane Review. He recently filed a lawsuit claiming he was wrongfully forced out of his medical practice over harassment claims by a former employee. He was also embroiled in a divorce and custody battle. In February, he allegedly used the moniker Scar215. Woohoo, that sounds threatening, doesn't it? I'm Scar215. Simba. On the dark web to try to hire someone to attack the former employee, putting almost $2,000 into an escrow account. The target should be given a significant beating that is obvious. It should injure both hands significantly or break the hands, the message read. It's unclear from the court documents if Ilg found someone to take his offer, but it's well known that many murder-for-hire schemes on the dark web are scams. It's well known. Okay, regardless, the feds say, Ilg again returned to it to deal with a new target, his soon-to-be ex-wife. She later told the FBI that she married Ilg in 2016 and had a baby less than 2 years later. The doctor then met a woman on the internet and invited her into the relationship. The wife increasingly became uncomfortable with the relationship and moved to end the marriage. In March and April of this year, the complaint alleges Ilg placed Bitcoin in escrow and tried to hire someone to carry out a completely insane plan to make his wife drop her divorce plans and return home. I need a rush job for next week. I need the target kidnapped for 5 to 7 days. While being held, she is given at least daily doses of heroin. She's also strongly persuaded to do a few things within 2 weeks, he allegedly wrote, under the moniker Scar215. Simba. 1. Stop all court proceedings. 2. Return to your husband and the chaos you created. 3. Tell absolutely no one about this. Also, the team should plant heroin and use needles with her DNA inside. After about 7 days, she is returned to her home. This is nuts. He set up a bonus plan as well, in which the kidnapper would be paid certain sums for getting the wife to do certain things. Oh my, including an agreement that she'd have to sleep with the doctor. This is, how do people in their right head don't do this? People in their right head don't do this. This dude is going to go to jail for this stuff. My goodness gracious. welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Well, the Axios website is reporting this. We have arrived at the moment of vaccine hesitancy, the tipping point. The U.S. will run out of adults who are enthusiastic about getting vaccinated within the next 2 to 4 weeks, according to a KFF analysis published yesterday. Vaccine hesitancy is rapidly approaching as the main impediment to herd immunity. It appears we are quite close to the tipping point where demand for, rather than supply of vaccines, is our primary challenge, the authors write. Federal, state, and local officials and the private sector will face the challenge of having to figure out how to increase willingness to get vaccinated among those still on the fence, and ideally among the 1/5 of adults who have consistently said they would not get vaccinated or would do so only if required. Republicans who say they don't want to get the vaccine are becoming only more resistant, the Washington Post reports. The further we go into the vaccination process, the more passionate the hesitancy is, says Frank Luntz, a longtime GOP communication expert, after a Zoom session. If you refuse to take the vaccine this long, it's going to be harder to get you to switch. Participants in the focus group said they were concerned by the prospect of booster shots, and most said they would want a fake vaccination card. Can I just say that had the government not screwed up the messaging, we wouldn't be here with this problem? Johnson & Johnson, its vaccine is perfectly safe for men based on the research. 6 women out of 7 million total people, male and female, have gotten a rare blood clot within 2 weeks of getting the vaccine. You have better odds of dying in a plane crash, of dying in a car crash, of getting struck by lightning than you do, or getting hit by a falling satellite, than you do of dying from getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That is a fact. And yet the government freaked everybody out. Now, what was so interesting to me about it is that when the government came out and did all of that, what the government said was, we got to do the pause. We got to make sure we've got the pause. And experts came out and said, hey, this is going to make people believe the process works. This is the ticket. This is going to make everybody feel great about the vaccine process and the safety and security. And sure enough, they trotted out a poll within 24 hours showing, why, yes, most Americans agree with the experts that this sure does make them feel super safe about the process. In the real world, every single smart thinking person realized that this was going to freak everyone out. In the real world, everyone kind of got it, that this was bad. What is remarkable to me is how the experts rush forward to defend the process that every right-thinking person in America could look at and say, you know what, this ain't it. And it is not a coincidence that hesitancy for the vaccine hit at the moment the Johnson & Johnson vaccine had to be paused. They still haven't released it, and Dr. Fauci's now saying, well, maybe it'll come back. We'll undo the pause. And people will be able to get it, but there will be some warnings. Okay, good luck with that. Again, if you're a man, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, there doesn't appear to be a risk to you. I think people should get vaccinated. I don't think people should be made to get vaccinated. I think that the vaccines work. And I think that the government itself has screwed all of this up. In fact, I put a large part of the blame on the messaging of this particular administration, which seems incapable of getting people to move forward and get out of their houses and get back to normal. I think at this moment, there are some states in the country where there are people who still haven't gotten the vaccine, who want the vaccine, and let's let them have it. But I also think there are a whole lot of people at this point in this country who they're not going to get the vaccine, and the burden needs to be on them. And the rest of us need to go about our lives. The rest of us need to go on and move forward and get out of our house and take off our masks. The idea that it is even, I don't know, controversial at this point to wear a mask outside, it's not. You don't have to. In fact, if you've been vaccinated, inarguably at this point, you can go to a restaurant and be in a crowd. You can hug someone. You can shake their hand, and you'll be fine. But the government isn't telling us that, is it? The government is hesitant. The government, I'm just not sure, is in the best position at this moment to really tell us what to do. They've become lost in the messaging. And the government itself has screwed things up. The government itself has worked very, very hard and made it very, very difficult for people to really understand what's going on in the real world. The lab and the real world are not the same thing. The lab and the real world do not always translate. And we're so focused in the government on the lab. Remember, in the lab, the big thing was getting the virus off of surfaces. And it turns out, if you actually read the studies, that they were putting highly concentrated amounts of COVID on surfaces. And if you read the results, if you read, what you also find is that in a lot of these situations, what they're doing is they are using concentrated forms of the virus that don't occur in normal settings, saying, oh, well, the person got infected by the super concentration of COVID. They're not using real world scenarios. If you've listened to me, I have been doing this particular program since August of 2019 now. And in January, when the virus reared its head in China, I was telling you, pay attention to it. And I do think I was probably the only conservative voice on radio saying, pay attention to it. I don't mean that to pat myself on the back or anything. I just think I was the only one doing it. Maybe there were others. Most of the ones I know of were somewhat dismissive of it. The government was dismissive of it. The Trump administration was. Dr. Fauci was. Why not be dismissive of it? I'm like, hey, this is happening in China, the most populous country on the planet. It's going to spread. They pretend to be a first world country, and they're not. It's going to spread. And sure enough, it comes into this country, and it starts spreading. And was probably actually here before any of us know it. It was kind of obvious that there was going to be a problem. And the government messages in the beginning were somewhat dishonest. How many people would be alive if the American government had out front said, wear a mask? Instead of saying, you don't need a mask, it's not going to help you. Because that was the original message, and to this day, I've got dear friends of mine who are adamant. The government first said, don't wear a mask. This is all a scam now. This is all fear-mongering. It's like going through TSA. It doesn't really mean anything. When actually, I mean, there's plenty of research out there, if you care to look for it, that you wearing a mask doesn't protect you from the virus. You wearing the mask protects other people if you have the virus and don't know it. That's the whole basis here. But all of that got mixed and muddied in the message because the government first lied. They can say that the data changed, but really what it was is we now know they didn't want to run on PPE. They didn't want to run on masks because doctors and nurses needed them first, and people were freaking out. They just haven't been able to be straight with us. And then they rush out and panic over the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And it was a panic. And you had actual people go on television with straight faces and say, oh, no, this is going to reassure the American public that they've got this under control. No, it's not. It's not going to reassure people. And I could tell you it wasn't going to reassure people. I knew it wasn't going to reassure people. And they trotted out a snap poll. Even today, there's an Ipsos poll out. Ipsos did have a very good track record last year in the election. Ipsos says, oh, yeah, the people, people, the experts, they put everybody's mind at ease. No, you got rid of the vaccine. And I was like, whew, I don't have to get this one. I'm safe. But you could still go get the Pfizer and the Moderna, and they're great. Listen, I got the Moderna. I've now encountered multiple people who've had COVID. I have not gotten sick. I haven't gotten COVID. My wife and I are able to go out on dates now without the kids and go into restaurants. She's got it too. She's got the vaccine. Life is normal again. I was able to go get a beer at a restaurant the other night on tap. It was glorious. In a crowded restaurant, not a spaced out restaurant. Didn't wear a mask on the way in. Didn't wear a mask while I was there. Didn't wear a mask on the way out. I've largely stopped wearing my mask unless I go in a place and there's a sign that says wear a mask because I'm vaccinated. And the government could do that as the message. The government could come out and say, hey, live your life if you've got the vaccine. Live your life. The government could say, rebuild America, get the vaccine. The government could say, pretend the pandemic never happened, get your vaccine. But they're not doing that. They're scaring people. They're not recruiting the people they need to recruit to get people. I mean, if you've got a bunch of hesitancy among white evangelicals and conservatives and Southerners, get preachers and get football coaches to barnstorm the South and say, go get vaccinated. Get the UGA football team in Georgia, get the Auburn and the Alabama teams together with their coaches. Line them up, get vaccinated, watch them do it. Make a big deal out of it. Get famous preachers out there. Get John Piper to get out there and get his vaccine. Get Franklin Graham to get out there and get his vaccine. Get them out there across the country. Tell them, look, I can do it. You can do it. We can go back to loving our neighbor in person and get back into church together without masks if you all get vaccinated. But the government's not doing that. You know what they're doing? They're sending Barack Obama and Beyonce and LeBron James and Charles Barkley. And oh, yes, I'm sure all of the white Southern Republicans these people hate are going to listen to them. Yes. Let's get all of the Hollywood elite who turn up their nose to people in the South and want to boycott Georgia for election reform and tell Georgians, y'all listen to these people, go get your vaccine. Yes, I'm sure that's going to work marvelously. Or not. There's a way better way to do this. And the fact that the Biden administration is getting a pass on this from the media is something else. If there was vaccine hesitancy when Donald Trump is president, can you imagine the story? I mean, they're still attacking Donald Trump for not going out there right now as a non-president and telling his supporters to get vaccinated. It's all his fault, apparently. They can't stop blaming him for this stuff. It's the Biden administration that can't seem to multitask. They've screwed up the border. They've screwed this up. And everybody's getting a pass? Why? Because they're in protection mode for the government. They don't care about you at this point. They don't care about the economy. They sure as hell don't care about small business owners who are going bankrupt. They care about protecting Joe Biden. They can't bring themselves to say, y'all are screwing up this message and vaccine hesitancy is on the rise and you are tone deaf with how to get it back down so people will get the vaccine. Because the fact of the matter is, whether they want to admit it or not, the Biden administration either holds in contempt or does not understand more than half of this nation. If you're not a coastal elite, they don't know how to talk to you. And that's part of the massive problem our government has. And not just on COVID.
Politics, news, religion.
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson. Welcome back. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Broke out into a sneezing fit during commercial break. I should have the Eden Pure in here. You should have the Eden Pure in your home, your car. If you got an RV, you need one. What is the Eden Pure? The Eden Pure Thunderstorm is an air purifier. You don't have to worry about changing filters with it. It is, you can hold it in your palm. It uses a USB charger, plugs into the wall. My kid uses it. It can generate ozone. It can kill odors. It can kill take care of the pollen. It can take care of the bacteria. It can take care of the mold. It is a great, it's well designed too. Just the portability of it makes it worthwhile. It's not one of those massive air purifiers. You got to it weighs a ton or you got to mount it on the wall. This one you can take wherever you need it. Small room, big room, put it in the kitchen, get rid of, you're doing a fish fry, helps clear the air afterwards. You want the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, and the way you get it is you go to EdenPureDeals.com. Eden, like the Garden of Eden, EdenPureDeals.com. And if you use my name, Erick, E-R-I-C-K, at checkout, you will get $10 off the lowest sale price at EdenPureDeals.com. It is the Eden Pure Thunderstorm air purifier that you want. Although if you need something bigger, they've got it. They got good heaters as well. But it's a fantastic company, and it is a fantastic product, and we use them in our house. We actually really do. I don't just say this because I'm an advertiser for them. We actually use the product, and that's how I know it's good, and that's how I know you'll like it. And, man, the portability of it, I can put it in my car. If there's smells and odors in the car, the kids have left the soccer gear and stuff in the car over the weekend, and it gets stinky, I can put the Eden Pure in there, and it works. It helps tremendously. So EdenPureDeals.com, that's where you need to go. Now, we need to get back to the show. Andrew Cuomo is admitting that if the government gives the SALT deduction back, he can massively raise taxes without consequence in New York. The one neat trick to jack up rates. This is very interesting. Liam Donovan points this out on Twitter. Interesting way to craft the argument. If the feds do this, our state-level tax hikes are immaterial. Repealing the SALT deduction would lower the effective tax rate on the state's top earners by 37%. The state's new top 10.9% tax rate becomes an effective 6.9% tax rate. The highest rate with the recent surcharge will effectively go down with a SALT repeal, lower than last year's top rate of 8.9%. This is striking. You're essentially saying, hey, we can jack up taxes if the federal government will give us the SALT deduction, and people will still pay less in taxes. That's their talking point, that people will actually pay less in taxes if you do this. But why will people pay less in taxes? They'll be paying less to the federal government. The IRS commissioner has this story out. $1 trillion in taxes go uncollected every year. The U.S. government is losing some $1 trillion in unpaid taxes every year and needs more consistent Internal Revenue Service funding to go after tax cheats, says the IRS commissioner. His name is Charles Rettig. He told the Senate Finance Committee the tax gap, the difference between taxes legally owed and revenue collected, has grown substantially since the last official estimate of a $441 billion annual average from 2011 to 2013. New sources of wealth are rising since then, such as trading in cryptocurrencies, were escaping taxation, he said, as was rising foreign-sourced income and abuses of business income passed through as personal income. If you add those in, I think it would not be outlandish that the actual tax gap could approach and possibly exceed $1 trillion on an annual basis. He said the agency is outgunned by increasingly sophisticated tax avoidance schemes, while years of budget cuts have left it with about 17,000 fewer revenue enforcement officers than it had a decade ago. If you're creative enough to figure out a way around it, I don't think you're necessarily under the obligation to pay if you can find the tax loopholes. I'm a big fan of the tax loopholes. I don't actually use a ton of the tax loopholes because I don't want to get audited and go through that process and the cost of it. Like, for example, I have a room in my house where I am broadcasting right now that is 100% my office. I have my live streaming set up in here. I have my broadcast set up in here. It is my office for work, and I could technically deduct that, but My accountant assures me that it's just going to be an audit flag, and why go through the hassle? If I ever got audited, I would be sure as heck to raise the issue and deduct it and say, oh, well, I didn't have this deduction. Going to go back and amend and do it. But I don't have a problem with underfunding the IRS. I think they're a bully organization. I realize we have to pay taxes to keep the government going. But the idea that there are $1 trillion in unpaid taxes because people are getting creative with their taxes, you know what? You want to stop it? Make the tax code simple. Make it so an ordinary American can figure out how to do it without having to go to H&R Block or an accountant.
30.
Yeah, I do not have sympathy for the American government on its ability to collect tax revenue when the American government goes out of its way to make it as complicated as possible for you to figure out how much you owe to the federal government. That's not a citizen problem. It's not a taxpayer problem. It's a federal government problem. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous to give them more people to go out and bully more Americans when they've complicated everything. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Well, the Biden border plan. It's come off the wheels. This is an actual headline in the Washington Post. The wheels fell off how Biden's misgivings on border surge upended plan on refugees. 3 reporters collaborated in writing this. President Biden overruled his top foreign policy and national security aides, including Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, when he kept in place the Trump administration's record low cap on the number of refugees admitted to the United States, according to 3 people familiar with the matter, a decision that was reversed after a public outcry. Biden harbored concerns about what the sharp increase in migrants at the southern border meant for the government's capacity to handle an influx of refugees from elsewhere, according to the people who spoke on the condition of anonymity to share private deliberations. In the end, the president's own misgivings fueled the decision more than anything else, the people said. The president was particularly frustrated by the government's struggle to deal with unaccompanied minors at the border and became increasingly concerned about the Office of Refugee Resettlement's response to the crisis. The unit, housed in the Department of Health and Human Services, has responsibility for both unaccompanied minors at the border and the separate group of foreigners seeking refugee status due to persecution, war, or oppression at home. Blinken, who has spoken often of his own family's history as refugees, appealed personally to Biden in early March after his department had submitted its declaration in support of dramatically raising the refugee cap from the historically low level set by President Trump. But Biden wavered for 2 months on what to do before unilaterally rebuffing Blinken and other top national security officials. Biden's concerns help explain last week's mess. The White House announced it was maintaining Trump's cap, then abruptly reversed itself, insisting it had been misunderstood. Those concerns are also likely to inform where the president lands with a revised figure for refugee admissions. The botched policy rollout, which drew fierce complaints from congressional Democrats and refugee advocacy organizations, was unusual for a White House that prides itself on discipline and little drama. Now, of course, they're throwing Biden under the bus. This is the beginning of Biden being pushed aside. I know, I don't really think so. But clearly there are people in the administration who are in damage control mode for the future Kamala Harris administration. They don't want to get on her bad side. Let's throw the old man under the bus. I have a theory. I think my theory is correct. What do we know about the American Press Corps? We know that they are Muppets of the Democratic Party. We know overwhelmingly the American Press Corps got broken by Donald Trump. They view Donald Trump as an existential threat. They do not like Trump supporters. They want to stop Donald Trump at every possible opportunity they can. And part of that is propping up the Biden administration and making everybody think the Biden administration is good. They trot out polls that with a 60% sampling of Democratic voters, guess what? Biden has a 60% of popularity rating. I think the media is going after the Biden border issue. Because, they've been highly critical of the Biden's border issue and the problems with the border. And my personal theory is the reason the media is allowing criticism of Biden at the border when they're not really criticizing him anywhere else is because they actually think it helps Joe Biden. What does the media in this country believe? The media believes that Latino voters use the word Latinx, and so the media uses the word Latinx. The media believes that Latinos in this country, Hispanic voters in this country, overwhelmingly welcome a flood of new illegal immigrants into the country. The media believes that the public supports open borders. The media believes that the public is on the side of expansive, lax immigration enforcement. So the media is willing to highlight what's happening at the border to show that Biden is moving to the left on this issue. He is moving beyond Donald Trump. He is breaking down the bigoted, hateful nastiness of Donald Trump, as the media would characterize it. He's moving forward, moving to the left, opening the border, letting more people in, and this is a good thing. So they're happy to highlight the problems at the border to show the Biden administration's evolution to the reasonable position. There's a problem. I'm not aware of Hispanic voters actually being down with open borders and lax illegal immigration. I think the data suggests, the voting data from 2020 actually suggests that a lot of Hispanic voters actually don't like open borders and lax immigration security. They actually like a strong line at the border. They actually like a tight border. They actually like a closed border because their families busted their butts to get here legally. They sure as heck don't like people jumping the line. The media doesn't get it. The media doesn't understand. The media is in the Democratic bubble, and in the Democratic border bubble, open borders and lax security of the border are good things. In the Democratic bubble, more refugees is a good thing. In the Democratic bubble, more illegal aliens in this country isn't a bad thing. Give them all American citizenship. We'll solve the world problems. Kumbaya. And I don't think voters are really down with that. I really, really don't think voters are down with that. And I really think that the media is actually hurting Joe Biden in ways the media thinks they're helping Joe Biden, in ways that'll be good for Republicans by highlighting this story. Another way the Democrats are thinking they're helping Democrats, but they're actually helping Republicans, is this bizarre story in Politico. Inside the Democratic strategy to expand voting rights state by state, Politico is running a story about how Democratic states, well, let me just read you the opening here. Who can vote in the next election and how easily will depend on where Americans live more than at any point in recent decades. Red and blue states are on opposite tracks in shaping the electoral process. As Republicans pass some of the most restrictive voting laws in modern times, Democrats are ramping up a strategy to expand voting rights by passing bill after bill to make it easier for more Americans to access the ballot box. Democrat-led states like New York, New Jersey, and Virginia have been busy chipping away at electoral guardrails, approving automatic voter registration and other measures designed to increase turnout as GOP-helmed Georgia, Florida, and Texas are trying to make voting harder under the guise of voter integrity. Notice this reporter is embracing the Democratic framing, the Democratic spin, that what they're doing is to make it more difficult for Democrats to vote by claiming voter integrity. New York has had one of the worst participation rates in the country, and we need to remedy that, said New York Senate Deputy Majority Leader Michael Ganaris, a Democrat whose automatic registration bill was signed into law in December. There's a broader principle at stake when so many states are moving in the opposite direction and making it more difficult to vote for blatantly political reasons, he said. The fracture between red states limiting voting access and blue states expanding it may deepen the partisan divide in an already divided nation. The actions are also likely to end up in the courts, leading to potential years of debate over what is and what is not constitutional. Now, you want to know the punchline? New York expanding voter registration? Georgia already has that law. Within weeks of gaveling into each session, Democrats leveraged their majorities in both chambers in New York to pass laws that expanded early and absentee voting and registered voters when they went to the DMV to get a driver's license. Georgia has had those laws for years. In New Jersey, they've introduced early voting. Georgia has had it for years. New Jersey will have less. And this is really, it's remarkable to watch the spin here by the media on these issues. Georgia has all of the laws that New York is just getting, New Jersey is just getting, Connecticut is just getting, Delaware still doesn't have. And yet what the Democrats are claiming is that somehow the Democratic states are moving further beyond where the Republican states are. No, like hell. The Republican states are already beyond where these Democrat states are. The Democratic states passing their election reform measures still have not caught up to where Georgia actually is. In New Jersey, Democratic Governor Phil Murphy was elected in 2017 after promising to sign every single voter rights expansion that Republican Chris Christie had rejected. Murphy and lawmakers moved quickly, with the governor enacting automatic voter registration legislation in 2018, which Georgia had in the early 2000s. The following year, he signed a law restoring voting rights for people on probation or parole. This year, the Democratic State House passed two bills that expand voter access on the same day Governor Brian Kemp signed some of the country's most restrictive voter legislation. Murphy later signed the measures that authorized early in-person voting, which they didn't have and Georgia did, and mandate disbursement of ballot drop boxes, which Georgia also did. Having 9 days of early in-person voting ahead of the November elections is crucial for marginalized communities and will allow Black residents in New Jersey to participate in Souls to Polls drives on Sundays, said Hanal Patel, director of the Democracy and Justice Project at the nonpartisan New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. First of all, does anyone believe that an institution called the Institute for Social Justice is nonpartisan? Of course not. 9 days of early in-person voting. Georgia has 17 mandatory and 2 additional optional days for 19. Last year, Virginia became the first state to enact its own version of voting rights when Democratic Governor Ralph Northam signed a sweeping law that requires all local election officials to receive public feedback or approval from the state's attorney general before making changes to moving precincts. Georgia has something similar. Shh. The law repealed voter ID and enacted 45 days of absentee voting and implemented automatic voter registration. So they have more days for absentee voting, but they only just implemented automatic voter registration for anyone who received their driver's license, which Georgia's had for a decade or more. And yet the spin here from Politico is decidedly for the Democrats. It is as if the Republicans have no early voting, no automatic voter ID, no automatic driver's license registration, no drop boxes, no absentee balloting, nothing. And yet the Republican states are far beyond where the Democrats are. I mean, this should be good for the Republican peace of mind to know you've already got more expansive voting rules and you're still winning in these states. And the Democrats are like, oh, we're going to make it easier for Democrats to win in our state now by doing all the stuff these states did, but not nearly go as far as they did. And somehow the media is going to say, this is grand and glorious. This is the greatest thing ever. Look at what they're doing. The conservative states are rolling stuff back without even paying attention to the states like Georgia that have already had this stuff for more than a decade and haven't changed it, by the way. They haven't rolled it back. This, by the way, is why when elections roll around and Republicans outperform polling, the Democrats are always shocked. Must have been stolen. Oh, it's voter suppression. No, you have no idea anything about what conservative states are doing, what red states are doing, what Republican states are doing. You are in your bubble. You have believed your spin. Your reporters regurgitate your spin, and you never see it coming. It, honest to goodness, is one of the great advantages Republicans have in this country. The media and the Democrats can never see them coming because the media and the Democrats are so committed to the fact that Republicans are suppressing votes and the like and not allowing people to participate. And you get a state like Georgia that has a massive wave of voter registration and Republicans still win, like in 2018. My goodness, which reminds me, Stacey Abrams back in the news in Congress. Listen to her. She's still doubling down on the election being stolen. Here she is with Ted Cruz.
Ms. Abrams, it's been over 2 years, and you still refuse to concede that you lost the race for governor in Georgia in 2018. You have said that, quote, you do not concede that the process was proper, and that, quote, they stole it from the voters of Georgia. Yes or no, today, do you still maintain that the 2018 Georgia election was stolen?
As I have always said, I acknowledged at the very beginning that Brian Kemp won under the rules that were in place. What I object to are rules that permitted thousands of Georgia voters to be denied their participation in this election, to have their votes cast out. And so I will continue to disagree with the system until it is fixed. We have seen market progress made, and unfortunately, it was undone in SB 202. But I will continue to advocate for a system that permits every eligible Georgian to cast their ballots.
Ms. Abrams, I'm going to ask you to please answer the question I asked, which is, do you, yes or no, do you still maintain the 2018 election was stolen? That's your language.
My full language was that it was stolen from the voters of Georgia. We do not know what they would have done because not every eligible Georgian was permitted to participate fully in the election.
Listen to that, Walker Owen. Not every eligible Georgian. Do you know Georgia had record voter registration and record voter participation, but she lost and she can't admit it, and good for Ted Cruz for making her fess up to it.
You can follow Erick around social media.
Well, I got to play this audio for you. Welcome back. It's Erick Erickson here. Tom Cotton also decided to go after Stacey Abrams yesterday.
Ms. Abrams, I want to talk about your role in the decision by Major League Baseball to boycott the state of Georgia and move the All-Star Game at an estimated cost of $100 million in economic activity and thousands of jobs for Georgia's residents. On March 8th, when describing the Georgia election law, you called it Jim Crow and a suit and tie. On March 10th, well before the Georgia election law was passed, you registered the website stopjimcrow2.com. On March 14th, you called the Georgia election bill a redux of Jim Crow. On March 25th, the bill passed into law. On March 31st, you wrote an op-ed in the USA Today about Georgia's law, and your first two words in that op-ed were, boycotts work. 2 days later, on April 2nd, Major League Baseball announced its boycott of Georgia. According to media reports in the days leading up to Major League Baseball's decision to pull the All-Star Game from Georgia, you spoke with baseball executives, you described the law as Jim Crow 2.0, and you urged Major League Baseball to speak out. But after its decision to withdraw the game from Georgia, you conveniently claimed that you had strongly urged them not to boycott after the horse was out of the barn and the damage was already done. So, Ms. Abrams, in sum, you publicly attacked the Georgia law as Jim Crow no fewer than 10 times before Major League Baseball withdrew the game. You told corporations that boycotts work, and you told corporations that if they don't attack Georgia's law, quote, I cannot argue with an individual's choice to opt out for their competition.
Yeah, he's right. And she wants to walk it back. She wants to say that she wasn't involved. She wants to say that she didn't have anything to do with it. We know that she told the commissioner of baseball that she didn't want them to boycott because she wanted to protest. And that, but if they didn't boycott, the players would boycott. And if the players didn't boycott, she would protest. She made it really easy for them to do it. And now she's denied it because she got what she wanted and realized, people don't like it. You wait for this to be a campaign issue. Senator Charles Grassley participated as well in this.
There's an organized campaign started to make big business punish the people of Georgia for their political choices. When you make political comments and it hurts people's pocketbooks, it ought to be something everybody be offended by. Most infamously, Major League Baseball moved the All-Star game from Atlanta, a move that's likely to cost the city's economy 100 million jobs, and that's affecting the income of Georgians and probably some jobs in Georgia. A state senator lost his job at a prominent law firm after political activists took a break from fleecing their donors to get him fired for his work as a citizen legislator. When partisans and companies collude to ruin the livelihoods of their opponents, there's a term for that. It's economic terrorism. The American people don't like this.
The American people do not like economic terrorism. That's exactly what Stacey Abrams and the Democrats have given them in Georgia and elsewhere. I had a conversation with a buddy of mine yesterday, and he used to do this sort of stuff for a living, and he said, you know what really is effective is not a boycott, but a boycott. Don't say I'm not going to go fly Delta. Say I'm going to go fly this airline because it represents my values. Don't say you're not going to go to this company, but to another company that represents your values. And the companies start to pay attention as that company's profit margins rise. Look at Chick-fil-A. How many people went and supported Chick-fil-A after the wokes came for Chick-fil-A? And Chick-fil-A is now the number 2 fast food company in America, the number 1 fast food chicken restaurant in America. People love them. And now they're starting to reopen their dining rooms. I got a text message from a buddy of mine this morning that said, how long before Chick-fil-A opens their dining rooms? Mine reopened. The one across the street from me reopened. I guess Monday, as the world comes back.
30.
And Chick-fil-A sales go up because that company has a loyal consumer following because people know Chick-fil-A embraces, accepts their values. And maybe we need to find places and shop with them who support our values instead of boycotting actively others. Let the left do the boycotts. Let's go support some businesses that represent us and support us and love us.